On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Arthur Goldwag. He is the author of The New Hate, A History of Fear and Loathing on the Popular Right. We have a link up at majority.fm to your book, which came out in 2012. I appreciate you joining us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, Arthur, there was a couple of things that I think. Your book has obviously been fairly relevant for some time, from even prior to when you wrote it, frankly. But the it is. I am increasingly conscious of the tremendous amount of conspiracy theory that is driving the right and the sort of I guess that's what you would call it, the popular right in this country. On top of which, West Point's Combating Terrorism Center came out with a report recently that said that violent attacks by right-wing groups and individuals have increased by 400% since 1990, and particularly a sharp increase in the number of victims between '07 and 11, I should say, 2011. But let's start here at the beginning. You say it's the new hate. Is this a new hate that we're seeing on the right, or is it sort of a recycled hate?
It's recycled hate. I mean, my book has been relevant since about 1798, or even before that. 1798 is when we had the first panic about the Illuminatus in the United States. The Illuminati doesn't start with Jay-Z. It goes back, very far back in history, and it's a fear of a terrible conspiracy, of a secret movement of people that want to take away what makes America America. And that's really what the question is what makes America America? And what the terrible thing about the Illuminati was that they were against kings and they were against the church. And, of course, America also begins as a country that was against kings and against the church. But once it becomes a country, there's a group of people that are worried about its revolutionary basis. And there's this kind of double quality with far right-wing thinking. On the one hand, they're always talking about tearing down the state, about blowing it up, about watering the tree of liberty. And on the other hand, they're very authoritarian and they're worried about lawlessness. And it's a contradiction that produces a lot of crazy stuff. And we see it all the time. And what I say in my book is that you hear it sometimes between the lines, that there's an underlying narrative that ties a lot of discrete things together. And when you hear a mainstream politician talking sometimes, if it doesn't sound quite right, it's because there's a different story that he's telling under the surface.
Well, what is? I mean, I want to get to what is that main narrative, but I mean, this is what's sort of fascinating about, for instance, the Illuminati, because it's still the Illuminati is one end of a spectrum that sort of goes through the Bilderberger group, I guess, and through the Alex Jones, Glenn Beck, at least Glenn Beck a couple of weeks ago before he got into a fight with Alex Jones. But it's fascinating because the Illuminati, and I assume it's the same with these other conspiracies, has a sort of a malleability as to the implications. I mean, like you say, you recount how it was a threat to the system of kings, but now in some ways it's sort of replaced it. In some ways, right? I mean, it seems to change. The implications of the Illuminati, for instance, seems to change with the times.
Well, when you talk about conspiracy theory, there's one document that is it is just so important, and it was deeply important to Hitler. It's been deeply important to the far right in this country, and that's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which it was a creation of the Tsar's secret police at the turn of the last century. And what it claims is that there has been a Jewish plot almost from, for thousands of years to take over the world, to install a Davidic king in Jerusalem and completely control the world through the power of money. Now, a lot of people, they're not anti-Semitic at all. They have Jewish friends and everything. I'm sure Glenn Beck considers himself a great friend of Israel. But the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is actually the script that he's reading from. He may not even know it himself, but the conservative narrative, it's not the conservative narrative, the far right-wing narrative is that there's this looming threat. And this looming threat wants to take the Republic of the United States, take its sovereignty away. They want one world government, and this is in the last generation. It was communism, one world communism, working through the UN, working through the Bilderberg Group. It was actually, the argument was that the communists weren't just the workers' parties; it was also billionaires. And it was Rothschild bankers working with the communists to bring the United States and the whole world under the sway of one world government. 200 years ago, it was the Illuminati. Now people are worried about Sharia and the Arabs, but it's always this other. And when you steep yourself in right-wing conspiracy theory, you realize you're constantly reading the same story, whether it's the 1840s or the turn of the century, whether it's today. It's different actors. You could take a document from the 1890s and just replace the name Rothschild with George Soros, and you would have the same, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's this fascinating phenomena, and I called it the new hate because it's just not the new hate. It's the old hate. It's the constant hate. It's the perpetual hate, the perennial hate.
Well,
and we're seeing. I'm sorry. Say what you were going to say.
Well, so what you're describing is what you're describing is, for film students are told to always read the hero's journey. And that theoretically every film you could break down on this one sort of template, obviously, but the names change, the characters change, but there's always a threshold that they have to go to and some type of advisor that leads the hero through. So you're basically saying that the conspiracy theories that we have today, the template has been around for forever in some respects. It's just that there are new sort of characters that are plugged in some instances. In some instances, some of the characters remain the same, that are plugged in, and it generates essentially the same story template.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's an archetype. It's an archetypal story, and when you there's this part of the archetype is that the character discovers this. Luke Skywalker learns about the Force, and he didn't know it, and he learns the whole story. And, there's always this moment, there's this aha moment in the conspiracy theory where, oh my God, it's the bankers, and the scales fall from their eyes, and everything falls into place. And if you listen to Alex Jones, that's what happens on Alex Jones' show every day. He says, let me tell you what's really happening. Let me tell you what's really happening. And what's happening is the world is about to come to an end. What's happening is everything you love is about to be taken away from you. And, as complicated as politics are, as confusing and mysterious and terrible and unjust as the machinations of money go. Nobody understands high finance. You need to know math. You need to be an insider. But the conspiracy theorist realizes that you don't need to know math at all. You just need to know the story of good and evil. You need to know, there are bad people that are trying to destroy you. And with somebody like me, I'm not saying that there aren't conspiracies. I'm not saying that there aren't terrible crimes. I have really serious politics. But what I'm saying is that life isn't a story like Star Wars. That that I'm very suspicious of people that tell me these great stories, these great narratives, because life is really much more complicated than that. And we're seeing this now with the shooting in Connecticut, Newtown. It took months, years before the 9/11 truthers started to get their story heard in wider venues, and it happened largely through the internet and YouTube, and there were a couple of YouTube movies that got a lot of circulation. 9/11 was such a shock. It was just so astounding that people that we barely knew about could do so much damage to us. So people told a story about it. Well, actually, it wasn't people that we don't know about. It was the same people that have always been persecuting us. It was this cabal of bankers. It was billionaires and, people from caves and Arabia working together with the same nefarious goals. And if you look deep into a lot of the 9/11 truth stuff, it ends up, an awful lot of the people end up finally citing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They may not know that they are even, but it's because they've been swept into this big story. And so with Newtown, Connecticut, how could somebody do this to little children? Within just a couple of weeks, there's a whole body of conspiracy theory. It was Obama. He wants to take guns away. It was the Israelis. They're either working with Obama or they're working against Obama. It was one group or another group, but the point is you can understand it. The point is you go from having to deal with the terrible mystery to dealing with a powerful story that you know what it is, and it's like your movie template. Once the audience picks up that they're seeing this archetypal story, they know that the hero has to fight, and that's kind of what the conspiracy theorist is telling you. You're not at the mercy of terrible things. Conspiracy theorists will always tell you that they're terribly skeptical people. I think that they're, among the most optimistic people in the world because they believe that you can finally understand things.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the Sandy Hook Newtown conspiracy theories, that have actually led to, just basically people who were not involved but protected some kids. There was a story out a week or two ago about one of the guys who sort of helped some kids who showed up on his driveway after escaping the school, has been harassed because and accused of being some type of crisis actor or something, like literally a hired actor to present this story. It seems to me that in that instance, there's almost more of an agenda. Because I understand, and this is why I find these people so dangerous. I'm talking more the purveyors of these conspiracies than the sort of the people who believe them. But I understand why, that impetus, that desire to have complicated issues or issues that are hard to digest, that human desire to have them simplified and digestible in some way. There seems to me to be in the case of the shooting in Connecticut a more powerful agenda but maybe that's just a function of this cognitive dissonance. How can this happen? Well, of course, it didn't really happen. It is part of some other secret agenda, like you say, on the part of Obama. I mean, it just seems to me that this conspiracy industry is almost getting more aggressive in trying to answer every question out there with this sort of.
Well, the Connecticut case is a really good example because, the anti-Israel conspiracy theories, we know where they started. They started in Iran at a propaganda station called the Press TV that broadcasts English language propaganda. That is actually the site where a lot of the anti-Israel stuff started. That got picked up by 9/11 people that I don't even know how much of an agenda they have. They're just into it. But then you get this, the NRA. They have a real problem. They need cognitive dissonance because, you have a woman who was a gun nut who had a lot of guns. She was a prepper, and her crazy son killed her and killed a bunch of school children. That seems on its face to be an argument for having background checks and all sorts of gun restrictions and so on. So they have to turn the story upside down. And they have to say, what happened here is, someone tried to discredit preppers. Someone tried to discredit gun owners. Look how terrible these anti-gun people are. They're more dangerous than the gun people. So that they're using this this conspiracy theory that comes from Iran to discredit Israel, to discredit gun control. They're very cynical. They don't like Iran, but they they represent the gun industry, and they want to. If you're going to look for a conspiracy, that's the kind of conspiracy that I see. There is. People manufacturing cognitive dissonance for a very real agenda, not a crazy fantasy agenda, but an agenda that's about corporate power and money and all the things that we should be looking at.
And give me a sense of. I mean, let's talk about the sort of the agenda of people starting this. I mean, because what is behind? I mean, in some instances, yes, there is value for an organization like the NRA, which has been driving gun sales for years, based upon this notion that Obama was going to take away your guns, and on some level, sort of their own success caught up with them on some level, at least in terms of some type of reasonable gun control. What are there different categories of the people who spread these type of conspiracies? In other words, when you run the gamut from the Alex Joneses and the WorldNet Dailies and the Glenn Becks to the NRA to the Ron Pauls, they've all capitalized on these conspiracies. It seems to me that there is a distinction, at least in terms of how direct that capitalization is. Alex Jones capitalizes on it because he sells more whatever it is that he's selling. He's a bigger radio host, a video host. He's got documentaries on the real Obama or something like that. But is there like a spectrum there?
Absolutely. And again, I mean, Alex Jones, pretty much everything Alex Jones says comes out of the John Birch Society's Blue Book, which he read as a teenager, and it had a profound effect on him. He's talked about that. But he would say, I'm not a John Bircher. I'm a libertarian. I'm an anarchist. I'm not partisan. I believe in freedom. I think he's gotten so, his product is Alex Jones. He was selling conspiracies about Clinton. He was selling conspiracies about Bush. He's an opportunistic guy, but I think he genuinely believes this stuff. I think, his creative method is he scares the shit out of himself, and then he goes on the radio and scares other people. He had this amazing moment in July of 2001 when he said, there's going to be a Reichstag fire event so that they can take our guns away and so that they can declare martial law. Something terrible is going to happen any month now, just like it was when they blew up the World Trade Center. And boy, has he gotten a lot of mileage out of that. He's like the stop clock that was right twice a day. I mean, he had been saying this for a long time. He didn't really predict 9/11. But he even, in that broadcast, he even said, that they're going to blame it on bin Laden. He hit some real notes there. You get a character like Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is another one. It's the John Birch Society. When he converted to Mormonism, he kind of fell under the spell of Clan Skousen, who was a very important figure. What they called it the Church Birch Nexus. There were some very, very right-wing Mormons in the 60s that were involved with the John Birch Society and ultra-patriot movements. And Glenn Beck gets a lot of his stuff from there. But he's also, he's got stuff that he's selling. And he's kind of a grandiose person. He's selling the idea now of a Glenn Beck city that you can go live in that's dedicated to liberty and the gospel of Glenn Beck. He may actually be crazy, but he's a skillful purveyor of this stuff. The NRA, long before Newtown, it was back in 2011, I think, at the CPAC conference. Wayne LaPierre made a speech, and he said, Obama has a huge conspiracy that he's a part of. He's going to not do anything about gun control. And this is a huge conspiracy so that you'll reelect him. And then as soon as you reelect him, he's going to take your guns away. And, the Newtown incident, when it happened, the timing of it was, a wonderful thing for Wayne LaPierre. It seemed to confirm his speech. And in the spectrum of conspiracy theory mongering, Wayne LaPierre scares me more than anybody else because he knows better. He's really using it to because he's because he runs a big lobby. He's really using it. A lot of the racist tropes that you heard throughout the primaries when the Republicans were fighting to show which one was the most conservative, and Newt Gingrich kept talking about the food stamp president and so on. Of course there's a lot of racism in this country. And of course a lot of the animus towards Obama is fueled by racism. But when mainstream politicians use that, when they use the dog whistles and the signals and so on, when they leverage the stupidity and the superstition and the fear of the public to get their agenda through, that's much more blameworthy than just being crazy or
right.
just being scared, and that's the kind of thing that concerns me the most.